Hey guys, this is just a quick intro to the series of documenting my last semester as a design student. I wanted to capture how I developed my spatial design thesis project by capturing the conversations I have during my presentation and critique in class. The goal of this channel is to introduce the viewers to different design fields and to inspire young creatives by showing what different designers do in their own creative fields. I'm putting myself in a vulnerable place by showing the process of how I develop my project because it obviously isn't going to be perfect throughout the process, but still wanted to share a glimpse of what classes look like for design students. It's also a super interesting time for all of us since school is remote due to COVID, but I hope that these kind of videos give you an idea of how design students develop their projects throughout their semester. If you want to hop over to any of these sections, I have laid out the time so you could skip to that part. But without further ado, this is my first day of semester as a design student. Let's go. Do you guys see Hannah Kwan?
Yep.
Okay.
We're ready.
This is the presentation I created based on some of the changes I made for my project. If you need to see my final presentation, I can show you that, but it's incorporated into this presentation.
Okay, yeah, no, I don't need to see the final. I remember the project. Did you do 7th term in person?
Half of it.
Okay, so it was last spring.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Some of the strength of my project mentioned were the drawings and the building development and the thoroughness of how in-depth I executed the project. The areas of improvement is that the entrance could be more inviting. They said that the way I presented my demographics sounded like I was targeting a certain age group, but suggested sound more inclusive, and form language of the vertical bars, which I designed to create like shadings, looked aggressive. So what I'm going to focus moving forward is finding the right language to talk about my demographic, to be more clear in my intention, bridging coffee and ceramics. I feel like the arrangement of the space makes sense in the story telling standpoint. Half of the spaces for coffee, half of the spaces for ceramics, and the communal spaces on the top. But I want to rethink about the convenience when you're actually like in the space walking through. Suggestions from critique about the form language is having more of an open sky view from the street level communal space. Also to push back the staircase for more gathering space in street level. I'm sorry if you don't remember how it looked.
I totally remember the project.
Okay, cool.
I don't remember in detail what the renderings looked like perfectly, but I have a pretty good one.
So I'm getting rid of the vertical beams and instead using like the light curtains to diffuse like direct sunlight, which is important for a coffee workspace and especially
when you say
ceramics.
light curtains, you mean like lightweight?
Yeah, lightweight curtains. It'll be in the material board.
Great.
So the final deliverables, I will have the renderings and diagrams. I want to focus on branding, like as a holistic approach to the experience, including like packaging and website design. Also to look at how I'm going to advertise this gathering space. So I changed the storytelling part from last term's final presentation. It was about bridging the generational gap, but now it's about celebrating the cultural merging across the world.
Okay.
So the Arc is a social hub with the goal of fostering cross-cultural interaction through the revival of craft that is merging different techniques across the world with a communal space, providing the members of the local community to interact, teach, and learn from each other's background and to enhance different culture into their daily lives, daily ritual. Okay, so
can you go back to that just really quick? So that's a more general statement that doesn't specifically talk about coffee and ceramics.
Yeah.
So how do you jump from this to that specificity?
So
like how do you get to the specifics of those two choices?
It's in the storytelling. In the next few slides, which I'm still like massaging. And everything's really new, so yeah, I need a lot of feedbacks on that as well. So
what I'm wondering about is whether the emphasis in this initial concept statement is too broad, and whether you should just jump directly into the choices and then talk about their cross-cultural values versus talking about it being generally about cross cultures. So we'll it's not that big of a deal, but we'll get into it.
Okay. These are like all new research.
Yeah.
So according to United Nations, the United States has the highest number of immigrants with like 48 million in 2015, and the US has the highest percentage of immigrants in the world. Los Angeles alone carries such diversity and celebrates a wide range of unique cultures across the city. These are the designated areas celebrating different ethnic groups. People in this area form connection with each other from knowing that they carry similarities in their background. Also, I lived in LA most of my life, but I have not yet explored half of the places in this page, and the ones that I have been to, I was introduced by friends who are from that culture. And for me, like, my friends became the bridge to their culture. So we live in a society where diverse ethnic groups are merging more than ever before. And while I live in the most diverse city in the world, and still have not yet been exposed to most of the culture in the city, I question, is there a place, communal space, celebrating the merging of different cultural backgrounds? The places that we can normally see different ethnic groups coming together are in educational settings, religious gatherings, and through fitness groups. We don't normally go out of our ways to learn about different cultures in our daily lives, but tend to stay in the comfort of what we're familiar with, which is why these places are interesting, because they become like the natural meeting point that bridges people from diverse background upon like similar interests. So I asked, how might we create a space where we can celebrate the merging of different backgrounds by incorporating some of the cultural differences into our lives? So for my project, I am usually using the revival of crafts. Craft techniques are ever-changing through discovering different methods derived from different historical contexts. The word culture derives from a French word, which in turn derives from the Latin color, which means to tend to the earth and grow. With these two keywords, I wanted to go back into the roots of the cultures derived from like natural resources that were available for different regions in the world. Ceramics is one of the earliest human inventions. It is a craft that was used to make objects needed for everyday tasks, and it was the practice that was formed from 28,000 BC. It became a key industry when people discovered that clay could be found in abundance from the earth. And now looking into the second keyword, grow, the seeds and plants were extracted to make drinks dated as early as 2737 BC.
That's very specific.
They think. So
super specific date. That's great.
Yeah. And there's like some legends about how it like was started, but this is a mind mapping that I did for myself to organize my thoughts. But each methods and techniques of craft originates from historical context of unique parts of the world, and artists' cultural background is super apparent in their method of producing crafts. So today, in reaction to like mass production and standardized living, people are looking to enhance their daily rituals with personalization. So I wanted to bridge the cultural differences from the revival of craft that carries the historical difference context, providing opportunities not only to learn about them, but allow them to partake in different cultures by adapting and applying them into their daily rituals. So the ceramics industry is really popular today, and it has endless possibilities of design outcomes, from different ways of molding, firing, and glazing. The design is influenced by the artist's biography and personalization. Just kidding, personality. And in herbal and like seed-based drinks, people are starting to like move toward making their own drinks, including coffee at home. They opt to be their own like baristas to customize every aspect of it. This is where I like need to improve on, you know. My project was about coffee, right? Now it's about like the natural source of drinks that we brew.
Okay. So it's more than just coffee? Let me stop you for just a second. And I think this is really very thorough, actually, but
yeah,
you're doing a good job with this. But I just want to jump back to where the project is. So is the project still, like as a project, is it still, you know, this coming together of coffee and ceramics? Is that still the basic experience? Yeah. Okay, that's fine. So just be careful that you don't get too broad. So I think it's good that you have this kind of connection to culture. I'm trying to remember, but I think we talked about that. You know, both of those craft coffee and the crafting of ceramics, right, have you know, strong connections to culture, right? Mm-hmm. And so you know, that's, I think, a really strong overlapping of those two things, and the way that you're setting this up makes a lot of sense. I would say don't get too stuck in it. So we're not going to, as we move forward this term, the project presentations should be more about the project and less about the research in general. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? So you know, it's, on the one hand, it's super important that you have the research, of course, and if you're starting to shift, you know, you're shifting the storytelling, you know, mm-hmm. from this generational thing to mm-hmm. more broadly cultural thing, so you have to mm-hmm. kind of do that research again. But at the same time, the midterm presentation won't be heavy on research. Okay. So don't feel like you have to get overly in depth about it with me. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah. But
so you have to know it, but I don't think from a storytelling standpoint that it has to be too kind of fleshed out in terms of I think the cultural connections are relatively clear. I think I would just try to talk about the ambition more clearly. Mm-hmm. You know, this idea of you're trying to create, just more simply, actually, not even more clearly, just more simply about this, you know, you're trying to create a place where different cultures can interact, or you know, cultures can, we can learn about different cultures, mm-hmm. cultures can influence each other, and you're going to do that through coffee and through ceramics. And why, right? Well, you know, on the one hand, there's this mm-hmm. interesting language overlap with the word, you know, from Latin, you know, having something mm-hmm. to do with, you know, the earth and grow, mm-hmm. right? That's interesting, but that to me feels more like logo. That feels a little bit more like a branding thing than it does mm-hmm. like, it's a very like hyper specific thing to latch onto as the concept of the project. So I think don't feel like that has to be the source of everything for the storytelling, right? So this idea that because there's enough, I think, when you start talking about culture and the connection between these two different, I don't know, crafts, if you will, I think it's reasonably clear. I'm not too worried about it.
Because like the feedback that I received was that some people like just didn't get it. They're like, why coffee and ceramics? So I try to find the more clear common ground for them.
Right, and I think you're doing a good job with that.
Okay.
I think it's potentially getting too detailed.
Okay.
So try to find a way to summarize it.
Okay.
Right. So the details. That's what I'm trying to say. Like the detail's important.
Yeah.
I don't want to shut you down. I think the detail's great for you to have, but I don't want that to become the whole presentation.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So, do you think?
Well, it's going to vary for everybody, but I would say that for this term, I don't have numbers on this, guys, but I would say, you know, usually I ask you guys to present in approximately 12 minutes for the midterm and final, mm-hmm. right? And I would say that you should be, 30% is like the max for setup, right? So you should have the thing set up in the first 3 to 4 minutes mm-hmm. of the presentation, okay?
Yeah.
And then the rest of the presentation should be explaining what the project is. right? And you will still use your story for that, right? So the setup is setting up, like you're saying, why coffee, why ceramics, right? That's super important, right? And again, the research you're doing here and the connecting of the dots is very important. It's just that you only will have 3 to 4 minutes to do that, and also talk about where your site is and who is your target, all of that. All of the introduction, you have like 3 to 4 minutes to do, right? So you just want to be really careful about how much of that, detail you get into in these midterms and final presentations.
Yeah.
Okay.
So location is Arts District. So from here, it's all from my presentation. So there's like different coffee shops around it that has like unique different like brewing methods, and these are some keywords described of the neighborhood. And then this is the street view. There's like communal spaces, and when you walk up the stairs, left side is the coffee workshop, and the coffee retail with like tasting area where you can connect with the barista and like ask about their own methods and connect over that. On the right side, there's ceramic studio, and these furnitures that I just like made for easier interaction.
They're custom.
I designed them for
they're custom made.
These. And then there's windows for ventilation.
Skylights, yeah.
There's the secondary ceramics where you glaze and dry, and the back door, easy access with like materials. And on the top there is like multi-purpose space where it could be used as communal space or marketplace. So this is my branding.
Great.
Oh, and this is the mood board.
Cool. That's great. So what's the material strategy?
So the overall approach to the mood board is V.
The look and feel of this is great. I don't have any issue with that. It's more the storytelling of materials. Something else you might look at when you start to talk about culture and cultures coming together, and then you talk about coffee and you talk about ceramics, those things actually, coffee and ceramics were things that were very specifically, they were very specifically present at the meetings of cultures, you know what I mean? In other words, the coffee trade was very specifically something that crossed cultures and brought cultures together. And when you look at like how coffee spread through Europe, for instance, and how it's different in Turkey, for instance, versus in Western Europe versus in North Africa, like these different local traditions around coffee influenced each other on the trade routes, and then you have the same sort of thing happening with ceramics and trade. So they both are also about kind of in a way that I think is very strong and helpful to you, very much about this connection between cultures.
I have some questions, but the next slide is the material examples of the usage. So I wanted to ask, like, if I say ceramics and coffee, there will be people that will say, why not tea,
That's fine. That's not a problem, I think. Because sooner or later, the why game can go indefinitely, right? In other words, I can always ask why. You will never satisfy me. I can always ask why coffee, why ceramics, and then you give me an answer, and then I can say, well, why cross-culture? Right?
Okay.
And then you can give me an answer, and then I can say, well, why that? And then why that? And then why that? It's like that game never ends. So and it's facetious too. So people will stop asking why if the story is compelling. So
is it compelling?
I think you're getting really close. You're almost there. Okay. I think, like I said, it's about simplifying a little bit.
Okay.
But I like this idea, again, of the crossroads and the cultural meeting points, and looking at ceramics and coffee. They're both things that that are involved in or that have these cross-cultural traditions, I think that's fine. The project can't literally be every single specific thing, right? It can't literally be tea and coffee and, you know, bread and dance and, you know what I mean? Like, it can't be everything about every culture, right? So you're being very specific. It's going to be about these specific things, right? And it's located in the arts district. There's obviously there's a relationship between, you know, the craft of ceramics and the arts community. Obviously, there's a super strong connection, and through that same connection, there's, you know, a lot of love of coffee. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's totally fine. I think it makes total sense. I am not worried about that.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm so worried about it.
That's okay. It's good to be worried. I think you're fine. I think as you refine that story and make it more direct, I think it'll be more. You'll feel more settled about it.
Okay. Do you think the idea of cultural unity is better than the generational?
Well, the generational thing is very, very far away from this, I think. Right?
Yeah, so you know how it's like a new approach.
That's harder to understand. I think you know, this idea of I'm not sure I would say cultural unity as much as, like, it feels more like it's about sharing. Yeah. Right? Because then you get to talk about, you know, is this project, you know, like I said, one month the coffee will be, you know, French press coffee, and then the next month it'll be, you know, Turkish coffee, or, you know, it can be prepared so many different ways, right? In so many different cultural traditions. In Turkey, the way they make Turkish coffee, it's the grounds are actually not separated the way they are. They're boiled in the water, and that's just it. There's no filter. And so when they pour the coffee into your cup and you drink it, the grounds settle to the bottom of the cup, and when you're done, they read the grounds, right? The way that in some cultures they read tea leaves, right? It's the same kind of thing, actually, right? So there's a whole cultural tradition in Turkey around that. And in parts of Eastern Europe that you don't find anywhere else, that's specifically about the way coffee is made in that culture. And so there's all kinds of things around it that are so crystal clear, you know. So I think looking at it as a cultural connection is much more clear than looking at it as the connection between generations.
Okay.
For me.
Well, you know why it was generational, though.
Well, I remember there being a very long path. You were looking at a different issue that was specifically related to connecting a younger generation to an older generation, right? So it came out of that, but it's no longer really about that.
Yeah. And
so I think it's okay to let that go.
Yeah. Okay. I just needed to hear that.
Yes, I think it's fine. And, you know, another, just in the back of your head, you know, the different generations also have their own cultures, right?
Right.
So your generation has a culture, my generation has a culture, David's generation
that
has
was
a culture.
The concept.
So this idea of exploring different cultural traditions is open to a generational lens as well. But I think when you start talking about the specificity of, you know, one generation versus another generation, that raises very specific questions that this project really isn't about anymore.
Right.
Right. And so I think the project is really about, for me, the project is mostly about the celebration of craft, you know, and you're picking two particular crafts that emerge in many different cultures.
Right.
Right. And have differences among the different, you know, among and between the different cultures, and then overlap among and between them, you know. Yeah. And so I think, you know, can you go back to your slide about you had K-Town and you know, the Filipino town, all those little neighborhoods. Yeah. One of the super interesting things about this slide is that all of them are streets.
Oh, interesting.
Right? Yeah. So you've chosen something about Filipino culture, Korean culture, African American culture, right? You've picked images about all these different cultures that are urban. But it wouldn't have to be that way. right? You could have instead picked cuisine or music or
Right.
dance or who knows what, right? There's so many different ways that cultures express themselves, right? So when you go back to what your project is, I see it through that lens, right? In other words, that cultures express themselves in a lot of different ways. One way that a lot of cultures express themselves is through craft, right? And so you're picking, you happen to be picking two crafts that they interest you, and they're interesting because they are crafts that a lot of cultures share. That's enough for me. I don't know if anybody else in the room has any opinions about it, if it confuses anybody else, but I'm pretty clear about that. I don't see a problem with that. I think in the past, for me, the challenge was, how do you connect coffee and ceramics to an older generation and a younger generation, right? Those things are harder to, like, you put those four things together, it's harder to see the connections. Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Was that it?
Yeah.
Good? Okay, great. So in terms of the project itself, you're not looking at making, you talked about some, more strategic changes to the project, but generally the project is going to be the same, the circulation's the same, the program's the same, right? All that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, but I want to develop it.
Yeah, there's lots to do. So it's going to be, there's plenty to work on. I think it's good. It's in a very good place to develop.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, Sam. Who's next?
We can go.
Sarah? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to quickly run through like